Welcome to the Victorian Bar Room. My name is Brian Cushing, and today we are going to be making a Manhattan cocktail from Harry Johnson's Bartender's Manual of 1888. And I have a good buddy with me here today who's going to be our guest taster. This is Ben Eaves from My Whiskey Den. Welcome aboard, Ben, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you here.
Thank you very much. So I feel a little bit out of place, like I'm not properly dressed for this time period, time traveler here or something, but I have a couple of YouTube shows I'm involved with, My Whiskey Den, with my partners Mike and Patrick, and we focus on American craft whiskey, and we really like to nerd out and go deep with that, bringing on distillers and different industry people so they can really go in about the process and everything. So if you really love to nerd out about whiskey, check us out there. We've also kicked off a new show with a friend of mine, Kevin Rose, and Drew Crawley, called the Bourbon Turntable. And so we're blending music and whiskey, kind of two things that seem to go together. We have side A, side B. We'll talk a little bit of whiskey, and then we talk some music, and we really kind of deep dive there on different musical topics. So be sure to check us out there. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook for both of them, Bourbon Turntable and My Whiskey Den. And so just have a great passion for spirits, and what you're doing here is I'm really excited to be a part of this.
It's great to have you out. We're going to have links to those down in the description too, so be sure to check them out. They're a lot of fun. Tuned in one time and they were drinking whiskey shirtless. It was great. So it's a lot of fun.
We'll keep it on here today.
Right. And you were at the Bourbon Festival, right?
I was up here for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. Got to attend that yesterday. Had a great time. Met some wonderful people. Sampled some great spirits, and here today to do the same.
Yeah, welcome aboard. You're the first person other than Amy to be at the bar with me.
It's a great honor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what we're doing today. The reason why I really like this is it tells the same story kind of that the first episode we did told, where with the martini. And we're looking at the passage of the Victorian style of mixology into the classic era of mixology. So Harry Johnson had an 1882 edition of his book that was actually very much like Jerry Thomas's book earlier on in 1862. You saw a lot of the same ideas, even almost some of the same recipes. Fast forward just 6 years to 1888, and we're starting to see these really familiar titles pop up, things like Martini and Manhattan that we hadn't seen before. And obviously, they're going to continue to evolve into the 20th century. So what we have here with this recipe for a Manhattan is a toe in the classic era, but still very much a Victorian cocktail. Now, the interesting thing about this is he only said whiskey. All right, now everybody these days, they take rye to be the classic. I love a rye Manhattan, you know. Bourbon's great too. It just depends on what mood I'm in or what I have around. But he just said whiskey, so we're going to try a little bit of everything. But for the sake of the start and the main demo, we'll start with a rye, okay? And we're going to use Dad's Hat Pennsylvania Straight Rye Whiskey. There is a lot to talk about as far as 19th century rye goes, and I'm not even sure I have my mind completely wrapped around it, but Old Overton in Pennsylvania has a really great project going right now. They're actually recreating 19th century rye whiskey. Their education director, Aaron Hollis, recommended this to me as a close taste to 19th century rye whiskey. So we're going to try this. It's 120 proof. What we're going to be using in all of them is we're going to use a dry vermouth, okay? And this is important. I always use a sweet vermouth when I mix a classic Manhattan. And so that's what we started experimenting with this with, was a sweet vermouth. And it was disgusting. I mean, seriously, I thought this was just a terrible cocktail, and there was no way I was going to make this on the show. But I was on a show with the legendary Shannon Mustafer, and she was doing a similar cocktail that she used a dry vermouth in. So I was like, well, I'm going to give it a try. This brings it home, okay? And pay just a couple extra dollars for the Dolin. It's going to be worth it. It's going to pay off. So we're going to use Dolin Dry Vermouth. Next part, you have a choice. Absinthe or Curacao. All right, and they do actually say to be sure that your customer wants absinthe before you just use it in their beverage, because I guess even then it wasn't to everybody's taste. But in the 1880s, absinthe was starting to find its way into everything. And Ben and me are both absinthe guys, and so we're going to be using absinthe today. Curacao is your other option where absinthe goes. And when they say Curacao, be sure you're using something like a Grand Marnier, not a modern Curacao. Not that that's going to kill it, but this is going to be closer to what the Victorians used. You're going to want to use Boker's bitters. You can actually get these commercially now. Angostura will still be good if that's what you've got on hand. And you're going to want some gum syrup. All right, you can make it at home, or this Librarian company, they are selling gum syrup now. So this is the choice for the Manhattan.
So I have a question for you on the absinthe.
Yes.
Do you prefer using a Le Bleu for this, or should you use a Vert, or does it matter on that?
You know, it doesn't really matter. Sky's the limit. Both were available, so I think it's kind of whatever you've got on hand.
Okay.
And this one in particular is a Le Bleu. This is from Spirits of French Lick, made by distiller Alan Bishop, and so it comes like a milky white color. But like Ben was saying with a Verde, a lot of times you see an absinthe with more of a green color. You get that botanical load in there for that coloring, and yeah, wonderful stuff.
Great.
Where the green fairy came from.
That's good to know, because that's what I've used in making this cocktail, and I didn't know if some of the herbal elements of the Vert would carry over, how that plays in that cocktail. But
you know, it's an interesting experiment that I haven't done yet. I like this stuff just because I trust Alan's history.
Right.
So, and I think that's why I've stuck with it.
Okay, great.
So let's launch into mixing. We are going to take our shaker, a couple of lumps of ice, 1 to 2 dashes of bitters, 3 to 4 dashes of the syrup. Now here's a little tip on the syrup. You can get these dashers really easily, and they're great for most things, but the gum syrup is too heavy to pass through them. So you're looking at between a half and a full teaspoon of syrup if you don't have a dasher that's wide enough to do it. So we're just going to put, Ben and me like the taste of spirits, so we're just going to do about a half a teaspoon.
Sounds perfect.
We're going to do a dash of absinthe. Get a good one in there. 1 ounce of the vermouth, and if you're at home, you don't have anything to measure with, that's just 2 tablespoons. And that's a really nice, precise way of making sure you get this right. I've got the measures, I've got all this stuff, and I actually just like using the tablespoon. 2 tablespoons, or 1 ounce of our whiskey. Again, for this first one, we are using Dad's Hat Pennsylvania Rye. We're going to stir it up. This, by the way, is a spoon that my friend Jocelyn from Oregon sent us when I noted that we didn't have an actual silver spoon here to use. And she said, well, I've got to fix that. And so she did. And so thank you, Jocelyn, for this spoon that we're using on the Manhattan today.
How critical is it to get the measurements exactly precise on this cocktail?
Very.
Okay.
Incredibly. And I'm glad you brought that up, because every time I've been on a show that I've done this and I just eyeballed it, it was terrible. Quite honestly. This is one where it's really important to keep it precise.
I know there's some that, yeah, you can kind of be off slightly, it's still going to turn out great, and then there's certain ones where you got to hit those measurements precise.
Right.
Kind of like baking.
Yeah.
You want to get it right on the mark.
Well, that's something I think is so interesting about this one, is that when I make a classic Manhattan, the other ingredients are just really a compliment to the whiskey.
Right.
Right? With this one, they're all playing together, and this extended into the 20th century. Strain it into our tumbler. And there's 2 of us, so I'm going to make another one, and we'll be right back. Ben, here's to you.
Cheers. That's really tasty.
You like it?
Very much.
So you've done this one before. What do you think about this in comparison to some of the ones you've done?
I really like what this Dad's Hat Rye is bringing forth. There's a little bit more of an earthy note to it coming on the nose right off the bat, and that carries through in the palate a little bit. The interplay with the absinthe and the vermouth and the bitters and everything is just, it's I don't know what to say. It's phenomenal.
Awesome.
So that's what's been interesting. There's been a few people I've made this for so far, and every time the response and the reaction is, "This is amazing. How did you make this?" You know, so people are really tuning into this when I've made it for them.
That's great.
Totally enjoying it. Question I have is, you're using the measuring spoons here. How would they have measured this out in that time period? Were they been using the same type of measuring spoons, or what's the process for that?
We don't always know.
Yeah.
We can basically look back and get approximately.
Okay.
And so they say in this recipe half a wine glass, right? And so wine glasses varied.
Right.
Depending on which one you had, but in general, they came in at about 2 ounces.
Okay.
And so half a wine glass is an ounce. The funny thing is, I had a collection of Victorian wine glasses, and so one day I just tested them all and saw about what they were, and they came in about, especially the older ones, came in about 2 ounces. And then in David Wondrich's book,
Right.
I wound up looking it up in there, and he said the same thing. So I'm feeling pretty good about the 2 ounce measure. The dashes, they had their own dashers. A teaspoon might have been like our teaspoon, might have been a little off. And so you've got a lot more up and down. And the bartender's trade was a trade. And so it's something that you learned and got passed down. You had to refine your technique just like with any other trade.
So basically, the bartender would work with the measures he had and use that to get it to the right balance and everything that he wanted for that particular cocktail to be
Exactly
the way he wanted to present it. So,
right, exactly.
Okay. So you just adjusted depending on what you had,
Yep.
basically on hand.
Pretty much. And
Okay.
your own equipment, your own practice, your own intuition. And the fact that anybody wrote it down, that just started in 1862. So,
It's amazing.
well, let's not just have one Manhattan. How many more do you want to have?
You tell me.
6? I mean,
Five?
well,
Yeah. We got all day. Let's go.
right. Let's do a bourbon first. Okay?
Okay.
Bourbon is something that I use on a classic Manhattan. If I have it on hand, if I'm just in the mood for bourbon, I think it's fine. They certainly had access to bourbon at that point too. The definition of bourbon was quite a bit looser at that point. The legislation as far as what you can legally call bourbon didn't happen until 1964, and so in the 19th century it was more of a cultural definition. I'm using this one today. This is the Lee Sinclair Bottled and Bond 4-grade bourbon by our friend Alan Bishop. He's the one that brought us together, actually, so thanks to him for that. There's a few things I like about this bourbon. Not only the fact that Alan's an excellent craftsman and very historically minded, he's done a couple of things with this that I think really probably get us closer to the 19th century. One is that he uses a heritage breed corn.
Right.
A lot of distilleries are using like a feed corn, something like that, and that's fine. He actually uses a heritage breed corn that I believe he worked on himself. The other thing is he includes oats, which is something that's often overlooked in modern whiskeys, but to me the oats give a nice, rich, round flavor to the whiskey. How do you?
I agree.
Yeah.
They really add to the mouthfeel overall, and then they're going to add a slight bit to the complexity in the spirit. And what I've tasted, different bourbons that have used oats, especially the 4-grain style, and that really is, if you're going back pre-Prohibition and especially Victorian era, that's how a lot of bourbons were actually made, and especially using those heirloom type grains, they're going to bring forth a lot more flavor than what the typical yellow dent that we have today that you see in so much of the larger scale production is being used. So
Yeah. Remember, bourbon came out of agriculture. All right,
That's right.
It's a product of Kentucky agriculture. So yeah, anytime you see a multi-grain bourbon with oats, if you can find Spirits of French Lick, get that. Whiskey Row from Kentucky Artisan Distillery, great guys over there, great craftsmen. That's another one that it's a great whiskey with oats in it. So Whiskey Row, look for that one too. Let's mix it up.
all right, let's drink.
So bourbon Manhattan with the Lee Sinclair.
Bottoms up.
Ooh.
Again, really nice. Definitely different from the rye.
Very different.
Right. This, I feel like, accents more of some of the citrus and fruity notes that are coming forward.
I believe so.
More so than the earthiness that the rye brought forth.
The thing is, when it comes to Alan stuff, I very seldom mix it, just because I like it so much. So I had never tried this particular one in the Manhattan, but that is just the perfect smoothness.
This is, I almost want to describe it as pretty. I don't want to describe anything Alan does as pretty, but this mixture here, this is really pretty, and this is something, there's an elegance to it.
Yes.
That I'm really enjoying about it.
Well, and this is totally different from a modern Manhattan.
Completely.
Yeah.
This is worlds apart from what people I think today would be considering or thinking Manhattan. I mean, just look at the color.
Yeah.
Honestly, you're typically thinking more of a dark amber note to the spirit because you're using the sweet vermouth versus we're using the dry here. But this is I'm sitting here just kind of mind blown tasting this one. I mean, love the rye, but this has got something to it that's just
I don't want to pass any verdicts too early in the show,
Right.
but honestly, I think this one is on top.
right now.
Yep.
I do. As much as I love rye, this has got, like I said, an elegance to it that wow. You just sit there, you take a sip, and you're really kind of contemplating everything that's coming across the palate, and again the citrus, slight fruity notes that are coming through. That is really well done.
I've made this with a lot of different whiskeys, and I think so far, like I say, nope, don't want, we've got a few more to taste back here, but this is good.
It's setting the bar really high right here. Yeah.
And guys, if this is not distributed in your area of this or the Dad's Hat or anything else you're wanting to try, check out sealbox.com. They've found a way to actually get craft spirits to your door that aren't distributed in your region. It's great. So don't let not being able to find it in the liquor store stop you. Get some of this stuff.
Or take a trip to Indiana and go visit the distillery and see Alan. And pick it up for yourself. That's not a bad way to do it either.
Yeah, Amy and me, we just go ahead and drive out there a few times a year and stock up.
It's worth a trip.
So, the next one, we're going to try White Dog. All right? White Dog, we're talking about an unaged whiskey, okay? The brown or the red color of a whiskey comes from the wood it's aged in. So if you don't do that, then you've got a new make. It's a clear spirit. This is how it comes out of the still. And this is another one that I don't usually mix because I like it so much. This is the Low Gap Clear. It also includes oats, and Ben was kind enough to bring me this bottle a few weeks ago. So we're going to use this today in honor of him. This stuff is drying up on the market, so if you can find it, it's wonderful. Get it. If not, there's some other wonderful White Dogs out there. Don't be shy about jumping in. Let's mix it up.
Let's do it. To your health, good sir.
To your health, and to you for this bottle.
You're welcome.
I like that a lot better than I thought I would.
That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you lose the color that you get from the barrel-aged spirits, but the citrus note from that just carries that citrus from that lemon so much more on this across the nose, and then palate-wise, there's clean, but the oats that come in this spirit, I feel like carry through.
You're right.
In that,
yeah,
you feel that creaminess.
Yeah, creamy, round.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Well, and the funny thing is, my first reaction was, this is almost flipped as far as how I would think of a classic Manhattan. So whereas in a classic Manhattan, the other ingredients complement the whiskey, in this one, I almost feel like the whiskey is complementing everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the whiskey is the stage that lifts everything else up. Carries with that creamy mouthfeel, that creaminess from the oats, but wow, that's again beautiful.
Yeah.
Gosh, this is getting really hard to figure out which one's going to be the standout here. But I'm really surprised at how well that carried everything.
It does,
in the right way.
So don't be shy, guys. Look at the White Dogs. You can really tell the skill of a distiller based on how their unaged whiskey tastes.
That I think is a big deal, because the reality is it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter tremendously what you put in the barrel. The quality of the spirit going in. You can't mask a bad spirit with aging in barrel like some people think you do. A really good quality White Dog is going to carry through tremendously, and I would really encourage you to get out and venture and explore some White Dog spirits, because once you do, you get a palate for that, and you realize, you know what, these are actually great on their own, and I think they're really a very underutilized part of modern mixology.
Yeah.
Because I think there's some wonderfully creative things you can do with the White Dog that, replace a vodka, replace a gin, use White Dog instead.
Well, because when you're using like a vodka or a gin, you're talking about distilling down to grain neutral.
Yes.
And so you don't really have as much of that character coming through. When you're talking about a spirit like this, like whiskey, you actually get the spirit, the character of the grain.
Right.
So yeah, I think a lot of people, and maybe you've run into this too, it's like they see this stuff in the store, it's a White Dog, it's labeled moonshine. Okay,
right.
They can do that because there's no legal definition of moonshine. They're implying that it's illicit, but it's not, because it's on a store shelf with a label. Right. It's a White Dog, and yeah, some of it is rot gut. That's because the people don't know what they're doing. But if you get something like this, Spirits of French Lick again, they have a really good one, both brandy and whiskey. Explore this stuff. You're really just going to get a whole different experience, and this is the first time I've tried this right here on camera.
Well done. It's fantastic.
So, well, we're not even half done, I don't think. Let's try Scotch. Glenfiddich. What were you saying about Glenfiddich the other day?
It's a standard classic Scotch.
Yeah.
Just pretty nice. There's nothing wrong with it at all.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to see how a nice basic Scotch carries through in an 1888 Manhattan. Right back with you. Glenfiddich. Scotch.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.
That's interesting. That's kind of a total departure.
It is.
I think the way the others were going. The Scotch carries through in there a little bit, and it brings on a little bit of that malty funk on the back end.
Yeah.
That, yeah, definitely that Scotch brings to it. But I need to go in one more time on this.
I'm honestly not excited about it.
Not really.
No.
No. It's, would I drink it? Serve it to me? Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Do I want to make this? Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'll stick with just regular, straight
Right.
Scotch. Side note, though, a variation of the classic Manhattan is the Rob Roy, where you actually do use Scotch. That was the second cocktail that Amy and me mixed together when she was living in San Francisco and I was living in New Albany. We used to do cocktails across the country together, and that was delicious. This really isn't.
No, I don't. I don't like how the malt plays with everything else going on there.
Yeah.
It's a weird funk to it, and it's just not the most appealing.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yep. This one does not win. What's next? Let's try. What do we got left? Oh, Tennessee whiskey. There is a interesting story about this. This is the 1884 Uncle Nearest. I'm not going to bother going through the whole thing on this because I already intended to do a whole mini-so just on tasting the 1884 Uncle Nearest and talking about its story. Just long story short, this is a real story about real men making real whiskey in the Victorian period, and a very wonderful researcher named Fawn Weaver dug in and rediscovered this. I'm sure you've heard of it, but if not, dig into that story. We're going to tell that story here soon, hopefully. But this is a revival of a Victorian Tennessee whiskey, and it's something the bartender might have had at this point. So we're going to dig into that and make a Manhattan from it. Here's to you, Fawn. Uncle Nearest. It's good.
That is good. It's almost got a punch-like quality to it.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some nice citrus. I really don't get a lot of the absinthe carrying through. Get a little bit. I can pick up a little bit of the wormwood on the back end here, but
yeah.
That's just, it's clean. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's like I don't feel like we're getting as much off of the main spirit.
No,
on this one.
Again, it's kind of like how the bourbon did. It set the stage to lift everything else up, but it's still it's just got a clean feel to it. There's a little bit of a creamy texture, but overall, it's very pleasant. All the components I think are working together like they should.
Yeah, it's like almost in Victorian mixology, they didn't really want you to tell where one ingredient ended and the other one started.
Right.
You know? And so I guess really, especially if you're somebody who maybe doesn't want an alcohol-forward cocktail, but does want something nice and balanced, something like this, a Tennessee whiskey, might be a good choice.
Balance, I think, is a fantastic way to describe this. It's really a good balanced cocktail.
Well, it's interesting, and we'll get into this when we do the full video on this, on the whiskey, but this is such a complex whiskey. You know,
it is.
It's one of the ones I think most that the more I drank it, it's almost like the character changed the longer I drank it. So, but with this, it just kind of balances out the whole cocktail.
It does. Yeah.
Well, what haven't we done? Mellow corn. Just gonna bust this down to basics. This is just a straight corn whiskey, aged corn whiskey from Heaven Hill Distillery. Ben, you were there earlier today, right?
I sure was.
Yeah. This is not bourbon as we would think of it, but honestly, back in the 1880s, if you had a pure corn whiskey aged in wood that came from Kentucky, it's reasonable to assume they might have referred to it as bourbon. So, let's try the mellow corn. Mellow corn.
Let's get mellow.
It's fine.
Yeah. There's nothing standing out. Taste the vermouth, get a little bit of the absinthe note, some of the bitter note. The spirit itself isn't really presenting itself much at all. It's easily drinkable.
Yeah.
Which may be the dangerous part of this. This is
Yeah.
actually a very easy drinking version of this cocktail. But there's nothing just really going, oh yeah, this is great.
You know, one of the things that I'm getting from this whole experiment is that mixing these, it's like I knew that the main spirit, like the main whiskey that you're using, is much more covered up than a classic Manhattan, and so I really considered this not a whiskey forward beverage before today.
Right.
But now that we've done this and some of these ones we've run over, I really realized how important the whiskey is to it.
It really does.
Yeah.
It sets a stage, and it can either present itself really well, it can complement, or in the case of the Scotch, it does not blend very well with the other components, or like the Tennessee whiskey and this one, it really, like I said, sets its stage to present the other elements in a really nice way.
Yeah.
It comes much more forward in the rye. The low gap, I think, was fantastic in that one, and then the bourbon from Alan Bishop just was. I think that one is the standout for me so far out of all of these. But.
Well, I was camping with a guy a couple years ago, and I traded him a hat for this stuff. Okay, so we've run through 6. I've got my verdict, I think, but you're the guest. What was your favorite?
Out of all of these, the one with the bourbon is the real standout for me. Yeah, the French lick.
Yep, that was me too.
That one was on a just a whole different level.
That's the Bottled and Bond, Lee Sinclair, 4-grain bourbon. They were all good except the Scotch one.
Right.
But yeah, this just there's something that just flowed perfectly about it.
I'd be happy with this one all the rest of the day.
Yeah. So here's to you, Alan. Thanks for bringing us together. Thanks for making the best one of this show. I honestly expected it to be the Dad's Hat.
I did too. I mean, I'm a huge rye fan, and I thought that a rye, a Manhattan, that's your golden ticket.
Yeah.
But actually, the 4-grain bourbon, that's the one that really just stole the show right here.
And I think from going through all of these and having a couple of whiskeys that, like you say, set the stage, but really more complemented the other ones,
right,
really drove home how much this stood out as the main whiskey in the cocktail. Which
is an interesting point because as a craft whiskey reviewer, one of the things we've noted about Alan Bishop's spirits, especially his bourbons, whether it's the Lee Sinclair, the Matty Gladden, their flavors and their components really stand out.
Yeah.
Even when we've compared them with cask strength or barrel proof bourbons or whiskeys, they hold their own against those, and to see that carry through in this cocktail, it's actually not surprising.
Yeah, and I made sure to pick this specific one because the Matty Gladden is another French lick product, which is amazing, but it's high rye, right. And so we had our rye. I wanted to be sure we tested it with just something that's a bourbony bourbon, and this certainly is. And that's it, guys. This works. If you can get a hold of this stuff, that's the best one for, I think, this 1888 Manhattan.
I completely concur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Ben, thanks for coming on with us.
You're welcome. Now, thank you for having me on. This has been awesome. Sit and drink with you guys. I mean, what a better way to spend a day.
So, thanks for joining us today. Thanks to Ben for coming out. Look in the description below for some more links to what he's doing. It's a great time. You got to come along for it. And until next time, we'll see you. We are steaming towards the very end of this first season of the Victorian Barroom. I think the next one's going to be our season finale. And we've got something memorable for you worked out with that one. So stay with us. Keep up with Ben. And until next time. Thanks for joining us today. We have a blast making these episodes, but they do take a lot of time and resources. And as the Victorians showed us, time is money. So if you might feel moved to show us some support, check that description down below to see how you might be able to do that. We sure would appreciate it. Also, don't forget to click subscribe and that bell icon to keep up with what we're doing right here on the Victorian Barroom. Thanks for being with us, and here's to you.